Stephanie Dawson and welcome to My Classic Soul, the podcast dedicated to the best soul and R&B music throughout the decades. In our latest episode, soulmusic.com founder David Nathan and longtime soulmusic.com colleague and music industry veteran Michael Lewis, who has worked with a number of major record labels including LaFace, Motown and Sony Music, talk about the classic album Stompin At The Savoy Live, the 1983 final LP by Rufus and Chaka Khan. David and Michael share about the dynamic onstage energy of the group reprising their groundbreaking hits of the 70s, as well as the studio recordings that comprise Side 4, including the timeless global anthem, Ain't Nobody. Without further ado, let's join David and Michael to talk Rufus and Chaka Khan.
Michael, I know that we're going to be talking today about one of your favorite subjects, and certainly an artist and group that I have known for quite a while in terms of my journalistic career, interviewing, going way back to 1974. And our subject today is the final album by Rufus and Chaka Khan, which is Stompin At The Savoy. And it was quite a memorable event in terms of mostly being a live album with some studio tracks, one of which, as we know, was a massive global hit, Ain't Nobody. So I'm coming to you to ask you, as someone who has followed Rufus and Chaka Khan, I wouldn't say, I don't know, since the beginning, so I'll let you tell us, is that true? Did you begin listening to the group at the very beginning of their career?
I remember their first album. I remember hearing Whoever's Thrilling You Is Killing Me. I was kind of young then. I think I probably plugged in more around the time of the Sweet Thing album, as far as my own personal. Of course, I went back and listened to everything else before that. But so again, I was kind of young to be able to see them live. So I saw them once live in the late 70s. But so of course, when this record came out, it was really nice to be able to get a live Rufus performance recorded, because in the 70s we had Earth, Wind & Fire's live albums, Marvin Gaye's live, the Commodores did a live set, but Rufus didn't do a live album until this one. Mm-hmm. Sadly, it was their last album together, but I was really happy that it happened that way.
And when you heard it, do you remember the first time you heard it?
Oh, absolutely. It was great. It was just to hear that the energy was great. The band, the side players that were there, the horn section included, great singers. It was just it was an exciting performance. And it's good to have that documented and recorded. I was really happy.
I'm not sure if people know much about the back. I mean, I'm sure fervent Chaka Khan and Rufus fans probably do know a little bit about the backdrop to how that album came about. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a little research myself because I recall vividly doing an interview with Rufus. Well, it was originally just Rufus doing the interview, members of the group doing the interview with me. Mm-hmm. And then famously, which we will talk about in a moment, we were interrupted by the late arrival of Chaka Khan into the room. But what I remember about it is that at that point, we were talking about the album Master Jam. And of course, by then, Chaka had already made at least one, if not two, solo albums. Mm-hmm. And although the whole conversation was about that this is not the end of Rufus, but of course, it kind of was, given the way our career
at that time.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about. We can talk about the songs on there, but I'd like to talk to you a little, some more about Rufus, the band. I mean, I know most people associate Rufus with Chaka as the lead singer, but
Chaka Khan's band. I mean, these guys were phenomenal musicians. Kevin Murphy, the keyboard player, was there from the very beginning, from the first album. I think that originally they were called Ask Rufus, at one point at the very beginning. And he's the player who was there on the first album. Bobby and Tony came in on the Rags to Rufus album. And at that point, Andre Fisher was the drummer. Phenomenal drummer. Oh my God. When you listen to those early records, Andre just he does things on the drums that are just mind blowing, you know. And then let's see, they had a different drummer on Street Player, Moon, and then John Robinson came in. He joined the band during Numbers, which was the first album that Rufus, the group, did on their own without Chaka. That's where he came in. And then, of course, he's playing on Master Jam, Camouflage, and this Stompin At The Savoy.
Yeah. You know, as you were talking, it took me back to a very memorable concert I saw, and it was the time I was living in New York and writing for Blues and Soul. And for those who may not know, Blues and Soul was a British publication, and I was the US correspondent editor at some point. And I don't remember where the concert was. It was not in New York. It was somewhere on the road, and it was a date that Rufus and Chaka, the group Rufus and Chaka, featuring Chaka Khan, was doing with Heatwave was on the bill, and I can't remember who else was on the bill. But what the memory? It's funny how certain memories stay with us for like seemingly forever. So I got there because I was covering it for Blues and Soul as a concert. I don't know if I was doing interviews with anyone. And I already knew the guys from Heatwave from London because although Heatwave was an international group, they were really based in London. And but what I remember is in between the sound check and preparing for between the sound check and preparing for the show, everyone had some time off, and I ended up playing backgammon.
What?
Because backgammon was my game of the day.
All right, everybody played backgammon back then.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was with. I think it was with Bobby Watson. I can't. My memory. I can't remember if it was Tony Maiden or Bobby Watson. I think it was Bobby. Because we just wanted to, kill time. I mean, there was nothing there was nowhere for me to go. I wasn't, a part of the show, so I was reviewing it. But what I remember, apart from playing backgammon, I think I probably lost. But anyway, so it might have been Tony. Who knows who it was? But anyway, one of the two. But one of the things that I remember, because I did get the opportunity to see a few Rufus and Chaka shows over the years, is the musicianship. Mm-hmm. The kind I think you made a reference to that, or I certainly know people have made a reference to considering Rufus as like almost Chaka's band rather than it's a whole unit.
Right.
One didn't really work without the other in the early part of their careers, mid to mid 70s, I'd say. But what I was always struck by was how in sync they were, and also how, just as musicians, they were just really funky and really, they were like, wow. So let's talk a little bit about Stompin At The Savoy from that standpoint, from when you listened to it then, and if you've had a chance to, I assume, listen to it subsequently. What strikes you about the musicianship on there?
Just that. The very tight, the funkiness. Tony's an amazing guitarist. What he does is unbounded. He can do anything. And as a singer, he duets with Chaka on a couple of songs on Stop On By, and also they do Ain't That Peculiar, which is really a lot of fun. When they do that song together on the live recording, and once again, Kevin and Hawk, keyboard players. When you listen to the what's going on in this live recording, is so full, so much happening, and it's just a really really intense performance that got on the record. I love that.
Mm. I know we're going to talk more about some of the specific songs, but off the top, do you have a particular favorite from the live portion of the album?
I really, really like Stop On By. I love Stop On By. I love what they did on that. And I guess it's because it's one of my favorite songs of theirs. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a really good good track on there. Stay is really good. I love that also. And of course, that Chaka added that onto her Epiphany Greatest Hits album.
Yeah.
So that's a standout track. Sweet Thing, you can't go wrong with that. Yeah. And it's just the fire, and once you get started, I mean, everything is happening on that. It's a great song.
Yeah, I was going to say about Stop On By. Was it Stop On By? No, what was the other one you mentioned before that? Stop On By?
Stop On By?
Yeah. Which one was the one written by Bobby Womack?
Stop On By.
Yeah. So I don't know if people are aware that there's a Bobby Womack version that it predated the Rufus version. Did you know about the Bobby Womack?
Rufus did a lot. They did a lot of covers over the years. They even did Jive Talking. Remember that?
Yes. The Bee Gees Jive Talking. Yeah, I do remember it. And it's interesting. You mentioned Ain't That Peculiar, and I kind of forgot that was on this album. I mean, because it wasn't part of their regular repertoire.
Right.
And I wonder why they. Well,
I wonder about that too. I mean, how did they of all the songs they could have jumped on, or recorded, selected. Yeah. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know what the background, how they came to pick that one.
Yeah. And then of course, also in that live album is, one of the Chaka Khan, at that time. In fact, I think I'm correct in saying that What You're Gonna Do For Me was, of course, the title of her third album.
Right.
Solo album.
Yeah, I think it had just come out just before this concert.
Yeah, so she was promoting it, smart.
Yeah.
And what I was surprised about, though, is that it doesn't have I'm Every Woman on it, because I would thought if they were going to pick a Chaka track to do live, they would have picked that. But
I think because What You're Gonna Do For Me is more of a band song, than I'm Every Woman.
True.
In the recording of that, it's mostly like strings and, But, What You Gonna Do For Me? That's the because that was written by Hamish Stewart.
Yeah, Average White Band. Yeah,
so there's that band feel, You get the.
And if I need to look this up, but I'm pretty sure that the most of that album, if not all of it, What You Gonna Do For Me, we're kind of sidetracking slightly there, was recorded in Montreux, Switzerland.
Oh, right. That's right.
With Arif Mardin as the producer, who of course was Chaka's producer for much of her period of time with Warner Brothers as a solo artist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Steve Ferrone from the Average White Band also was on there.
Yeah. But we digress slightly there. But I love that was included on there. And then, of course, we should also talk about some of the solo recordings that were studio recordings that were added on as a fourth side to what was back then a 2 LP set. Mm-hmm. We, of course, are talking prior to the world of CDs. So sure. It was a double album. And I don't know that when they recorded the studio portion, that anyone thought that Ain't Nobody would become
the hit that it was.
It would become like the most classic. It would become like this timeless, evergreen dance, pop, R&B, global anthem. And it's funny, when I ask people of a different generation, if they're familiar with Chaka Khan, they usually only remember, they associate that as a Chaka Khan song, Ain't Nobody, and of course I'm Every Woman. But it's really, and I Feel For You. So those are the three that people of other generations kind of relate to Chaka Khan. But of course, Ain't Nobody is actually a Rufus and Chaka Khan record.
It is. And it was written by Paul Walensky, who wrote a lot of, he wrote, once he joined the group, he's an amazing songwriter. He wrote, oh my God, he wrote Street Player, song Street Player. He wrote Blue Love on that record. He wrote Any Love on the Master Jam record, and What You Feel. He wrote that all. So yeah, I mean, that guy's an amazing songwriter. And
I think he co-wrote or wrote, we have to look at the credits, Egyptian song.
I would have to check on that. I'm not sure.
I think he did. I was reading an interview that I did with the group. This is not the Notorious interview, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I think it was in, because I know that album came out, I think, 1977. And let me see if I can crib a little bit and see if I can find it while we're talking. Yeah, here we go. I think here it is. Let's see. Talks about Egyptian song, which is not on this album. Obviously, it's focused on. Yeah, it's actually Chaka wrote it with David Hawk Walensky.
Okay. Yeah.
So a piece of trivia there. But anyway, let's get back to the point. So Ain't Nobody, when you heard Ain't Nobody, as part of that LP, did you think, wow? I mean, what was your reaction to it?
The clubs were on fire with that song. I mean, you're talking about everybody scrambling. When you hear those first little bubbles come up, everybody just running to the dance floor. And I mean, even to this day, if you put that on, the same thing's going to happen. Nothing's changed with that song. Nothing's always changed with that record. It's just as fresh and exciting right now when you hear it. And Ain't Nobody is so great that I've heard other people close their show with Ain't Nobody.
Wait, who?
Peabo Bryson.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was his encore song because he knew the crowd was going to get up and dance.
Anyone else?
There's a great version of George Michael singing Ain't Nobody.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that. Well, it's interesting. And Chaka has to do it too. I mean, to this day, I mean, it's a bit difficult to know what to close with because I guess she has choices of I'm every woman and I Feel For You is, of course, in there in the repertoire. Yeah. But I think certainly in Britain, whenever Chaka's performed in Britain in the last few years,
Ain't Nobody's always
to end with Ain't Nobody.
It's always a closer. Yeah.
Let's pause for a quick break. Then we'll return to David Nathan and Michael Lewis as they continue to discuss the classic Stompin' At The Savoy live album by Rufus and Chaka Khan.
Check out In the Meantime by renowned trumpeter Willie Bradley featuring Gerald Alston, the lead singer of the legendary group The Manhattans. This jazzy groove with lyrics right on time with what's happening in the world today is on Soul Music Records, available now on all digital platforms.
But there are some other studio. We want to talk about the studio recordings a little bit. The one in particular that I'd like to focus on, knowing of your interest and love for what we would call classic jazz vocalists, is Don't Go to Strangers. Did you know that song before you heard it on the album?
I did not.
Savoy?
I did not. I wasn't familiar with it until I heard that. And of course, since then I've heard any number of other singers record that because it's a standard for sure. But the remarkable thing about this version is Joe Sample playing piano on it. His opening notes. Oh my God, Joe Sample is just he's a god of the piano, man.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, why I found it, because that was the first time I really heard a recording of Chaka that really did show her jazz chops, so to speak, or her love for the genre. And actually, what it brought to mind was one of the earliest interviews that we did. She and I did an interview. The first interview I did with Chaka Khan. It was supposed to be a Rufus and Chaka interview, but she was the only one on the phone and was calling from. I was in my little flat in Bayswater in London, and she was in Chicago. Actually, she wasn't in LA when we did the interview. And I don't know if it was on that interview, but it was the next interview after that was our first one. And the one after that, I think, is where she talked about how much she loved jazz, and she was looking forward to the opportunity at some point to do more jazz kind of material. And I guess she envisioned that at that point she would be doing it with the group, because at that point she wasn't having conversations about a solo career. So I always think of "Don't Go to Strangers" on Stompin At The Savoy as kind of like the first opportunity for the whole for the audience, for Rufus and Chaka Khan and general audience, to hear something that was this clearly still is, and has always been dear to her heart. I want to say anything about Chaka and jazz.
There was a little bit of hint, if you think about on the Street Player album, that song "Destiny." Yeah, has a strong jazz feel to it, with the Claire Fisher strings and all that. It's really good. And I would say even like a song like "Best of My Heart," "Best of Your Heart," that has some jazz feeling to it. And if you look, there's a picture of the set list in the Stompin At The Savoy.
Okay. And bring that up on the screen if we can. There's
a picture of the set list, and "Best of Your Heart" is actually on the set list. Really? And "Everlasting Love." Now, "Everlasting Love" showed up on a soundtrack of a movie, The Night Shift.
Yes.
It did show up, but that "Best of Your Heart," I don't know where that song is, and I'm wondering why it didn't come up on when it was reissued. Or I don't know or maybe it didn't. Maybe they didn't play it. Maybe it was on the set list, but it didn't happen. I don't know.
Yeah, which is quite possible. I mean, we know that one of the great things about a band and artists of that time period is that sometimes they would just change things up, literally, on stage. Or if there was an intermission, they would say, "Well, no, let's drop this. Let's do that instead." I mean, because a lot of it, what I really used to love so much about those shows, not just Rufus and Chaka, but other people I would see, they would literally judge the energy of the crowd to choose what to do. And that was something that was, because this is long before the days of synthesizers or music that could be augmented to the live performance. And so really it was very much in sync with whatever the energy was of the moment. So maybe that's what it was. I mean, there are many famous times I can think of where people just change their set literally in the middle of the set. I mean, change the sequence of things, which I think is a kind of like a lost art now.
And then when I mentioned the liner notes, one other thing I wanted to point out in this discussion was what a lot of people don't know. There's a Quincy Jones passage in the liner notes on here, and he points out that just before he did the Master Jam album with Rufus, he recorded "Rock With You" off the Michael Jackson, and the rhythm section on "Rock With You" was Rufus. It was Bobby Watson, and John Robinson. So yeah, that's a little known fact.
I didn't know. Yeah, I definitely didn't know that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you brought that up, because it also references the interview that I made an earlier reference to, which I call the infamous Rufus and Chaka interview. And infamous only because it was meant to be a group with her interview. It was supposed to be all of them, right? And what I recall is that when I walked into it was in New York, and it was where I lived at the time. And to give some context around it, as we know that at that point, Chaka had done, I think, 2 solo albums, if I'm correct. So that she had done the first one that's self-titled, and then there was Naughty. Yeah. So she was 2 albums in, and most people, I think, said and felt that they'd already broken up. They felt that the group had already broken up, even though they technically hadn't. And Master Jam was a part of a fulfillment of a contractual obligation. It's pretty smart to have done that with Quincy Jones. If you're going to fulfill a contractual obligation, it's a pretty good idea to... and the contractual obligation, of course, was Chaka as part of her deal of doing solo albums separately, which she still had to fulfill to make 2 albums with Rufus. Yeah, correct. And so here we are, and we're sitting there, and we're all ready to go, and the members of the group are there. And of course, I already knew them from having done interviews with them before. And of course, I mentioned about seeing them at a show on the road somewhere, and we it was really supposed to be everybody, but she wasn't there. So we said, they said, let's get. I think it was Kevin actually. He said, let's get going, let's get started. So we started, talking about the album and how. And she just walked into the room, and in the middle of the interview, and she just started interrupting.
Oh yeah.
She just started interrupting when I would ask a question. She just kind of jump in, and you could tell. They were not. I think the way she described it. How does she describe it in the book? In her autobiography, she references the interview. We have it there.
Right there. She said, at one point, I barged in with, "I think art is pure, and I think it's been raped and whored because of greed and selfishness. People no longer respect music as an art form the way they should, and that to me is a real sin."
But did she say about how she just jumped into the interview? How did she characterize the interview itself? Because it was a Rufus and Chaka Khan interview, really.
It says she kept pacing back and forth, staring out the window, and literally speaking over band members as I asked questions. It was obvious from the expression on the faces of Murphy and Walensky in particular that all wasn't well in the camp. And that's what. And then she wrote, "At one point, I barged in with that quote about art."
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened, Michael. And it was difficult.
Well, they were kind of like 2 separate orbits,
Yeah, at that point. Which also, but I'm bringing it up. Of course, things happened in between. Obviously, they went off and did another solo album, Rufus, by themselves. And then I think, am I correct that she also did one? She also had one more to do with them as part of a contract. Her contract.
Yeah, camouflage.
Yeah. Right. So by the time Stompin At The Savoy came out, they were separate entities completely,
and they had to get together to make it happen. They had to have some reconciliation. Now, and again, they got back together in 2000 for a tour.
I didn't know that. Really? Wow.
They did.
Okay. Well, what I was going to point to is that if you listen to Stompin At The Savoy, it's as if nothing, as if they didn't skip a beat. You know what I'm saying? In other words, even though there were years in between, I mean, because that interview you just talked about, Master Jam's 1979, and here we are in 1983, and here comes Stompin At The Savoy, and it's as if nothing had not like nothing had happened, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's no, it just sounded kind of tight.
It's live, man. It's Rufus's greatest hits live.
Yeah. And I was listening to some of it earlier, and the song that most resonates. It's funny you mentioned some of the things songs that you listened to prior to the live album that were amongst your Rufus and Chaka favorites, and certainly mine was Sweet Thing. Mm-hmm. I remember when Sweet Thing came out. I mean, the studio recording, and I won't go into the details, but just say that that some of the lyric lines of "Sweet Thing" applied were applicable. I will love you anyway, even if you cannot stay. Okay. And I'm sure I wasn't the only person who related to those words. What I love about that we're looking back at that album, it really was. In one sense, it's kind of like an end of an era, not just an end of an era for Rufus and Chaka Khan, but an end of a particular kind of era of music where you had a band and a featured singer that were so in sync.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they managed to put that together for this recording. Mm-hmm. How great is that? That even though sadly it was their last recording together, it's a classic piece of history.
I'm curious. You mentioned about the touring in 2000. Did you get to see them at all live?
I did.
Can you comment on that? Because I didn't get to see that. So.
It was a tight show. It was a lot of fun, and now I was hoping that, hoping against hope that somehow they would manage to pull it together, and do more than just that one tour together. It just happened. Now, recently there was a talk about a film being recorded of the group. I don't know what happened with that. It's been a couple years back that I remember seeing pictures of them together, and somebody was doing a Rufus documentary. I'm not sure what happened with that, if it'll ever come out, but that would be really interesting to see.
Yes. If I might quote Wikipedia, not always the most reliable source, but in this, and we don't know how reliable it is because I've certainly never seen this. But to quote that Chaka reunited with the group for what was to be later released as a documentary film titled "Stompin At The Savoy," and for whatever reason, the film was not released at the time, and only the album came out. And I'm wondering, is that what you're referring to, or is this some other?
This is a very recent thing. A recent.
Oh, okay.
Recent as in like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. I wonder what happened to the live footage of that of Stompin At The Savoy. It would be great to see it.
I hadn't even heard about that. I never heard there was a live version.
And is there anything? I know we've only got a few more minutes. So I'm just curious to find out from you. In regard to Rufus, actually thinking about this as basically was their swan song. This was the last recording. Do you feel it really captured, for those who may not have been, for people who've come subsequently, generations who subsequently listened to it, do you think it really captured the essence of who it was?
And also because of the fact that we don't have bands like that anymore. We simply don't have bands that perform and write together, and it just doesn't happen that way. It seems. In the 70s, they were everywhere. Everywhere there was a band. The Ohio Players, or Lakeside, or
Confunction.
And it's a rarity. So this is kind of like a time capsule. And this was recorded in 82. It came out. So it is kind of like the end of an era.
Yeah.
And this is a really great document of it, I think.
Yes. There was one other thing I was going to say when you were talking about the end of it, about the group and what they meant. I think one thing that we should also reference is that it was one of a very few internationally famous, well-known groups whose lineup was interracial.
That is true. Mm-hmm. That is true. And
that sometimes gets missed because people just talk about the music. And that in of itself, if we go back, I was trying to think of another group of that time period that that was comparable. Can you think of anyone?
I cannot. I can't.
Yeah, it's funny. I at the time, I remember that was a part of the whole thing when you would go see them live, when I would go see them live. That was noticeable because, primarily, I mean, I think about the average, we mentioned the average white band, and, well, I don't know how average they were, but the point being that, I think that also had some elements of being interracial too. I mean, Steve Ferron was, I think, as I recall, of Caribbean descent.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to think, was there any other group? So they were pioneers. So Rufus and Chaka Khan were pioneers in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think it's worth bringing to people's attention. Mm-hmm. That was, yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about Rufus, the group?
Yeah.
And anything you want to say about Chaka? And
I'll point out that I've been listening to the Rufus albums lately, and I want to go back and check those out if you haven't, because they are just as fiery without Chaka Khan. Believe me. If you
Oops. Are you ready to get a little a blast from the Chaka fans? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Everything is there but the hits. I mean, maybe they didn't have the right songs, but the talent, the props, the chops are there in full force. Yeah.
And when you say that, you're referring to I think it's is it called
Sealed in Red?
Sealed in Red, yeah.
And Party Till You're Broke.
Yeah. It's interesting because I kind of forget about them too. I mean, you're right; they are solid albums.
They're solid.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you: do you have a favorite Rufus and Chaka album? I know that's a hard question. Just one. That's the one for you.
Ask Rufus.
Okay, well we're in accord on that one.
Ask Rufus, but I'm telling you, Street Player is right there, neck and neck with it. I mean, Street Player takes them into a different kind of I don't know. It's a different kind of sexy groove with Street Player. With Your Heart and those songs. It's just like a really kind of nice groove on those two. But I don't know, Ask Rufus just as a whole is just like a collection of just greatness.
Brilliant songs.
Yeah.
And I have two personal favorites. One we mentioned, Egyptian Song. Well, that's kind of obvious.
Oh yeah.
He says as he holds up his ankh.
Always.
And fortunately over the years I've had opportunity to talk to Chaka about Egyptian Song and about, our mutual interest in
that performance with the Roots. She has a live performance of Egyptian Song that she recorded with the Roots.
Really? Wow.
Mind blowing.
Wow.
It's the only time I've heard her sing that live.
And the other song is Hollywood.
Oh yeah, man.
Do you know why? Do you know why it's a personal favorite of mine?
Why did you wait at bus stops all your life?
You see, for the benefit of those who will be watching this, in the interest of transparency, Michael and I, apart from being friends for many, many years, because we met when I lived in LA, and he knows, as do all of my friends who live there, that I never drove. Say it again?
You're one of the few people who lived in LA who does not drive.
That's right.
You and Quincy.
Like Quincy, exactly. Quincy as in Jones. And so when I heard that song, I'll never forget, she waited at bus stops it's he, and the song's he. He's waited at bus stops all his life. What's the next line of the song?
He's been in and out of those spaces.
Yeah. And I love that song. Hollywood was my experience of Los Angeles contemporaneously, because I wasn't living there at that time, but I had lived there for 6 months in 1975, and subsequently when I went back to live there, that hadn't changed. I was still on the bus, and everything all the lyrics of that song were as true in 1984 as they were in 1976.
Seven.
I thought it was 7. There you go. Anyway, so Mike, I just really want to thank you for taking time today to talk to My Classic Soul and to me about one of our favorite subjects. Yeah. And just really thank you for. I know you're a lifelong Rufus and Chaka fan, and so it's really great to get your observations and thoughts about one of the most important albums, I would say, of the 80s.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
For having me, David. I appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, David and Michael. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform. And visit us for breaking news and daily updates about your favourite soul and R&B artists over at soulmusic.com. I'm Bethany Dawson. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on My Classic Soul.